Today we're going to have a special Hanukkah Shiur, and we'll try to focus on Hanukkah, which is connected specifically to this year, going to visit the first Hanukkah that we had in the time of the Chashmonai'm. So I'd like to start with the Rambam. The Rambam in the beginning of Hilchas Hanukkah says, B'bayis Sheni, Keshemolchu Yovon, Gozru Gezeres al Yisrael, Ubitlu Dosom, Velo Yinichu Oisom La'asoik B'Toiro B'Mitzvos, Ve'poshtu Yodom B'Mamoinom U'Bivneisehem, V'nichlesu Lo Heichol, U'fortzu Boi Protzois, Ve'timu Atayres, Ve'tzar Lohem LeYisrael Me'oid Mipneihem, ולחוצו מלחץ גודל, עד שריחם עליהם אלוקי אבויסנו והושיעם מיודום והצילום, וגוברו בני חשמונאי הכהנים הגדולים והרוגום, והושיעו ישראל מיודום, והעמידו מלך מן הכהנים, וחוזרו מלכוס לישראל יסר על נוסעים שונו עד החורבן השני. וכשגוברו ישראל על אויביהם ואיבדום ב15 בחודש כסלו היו, ונכנסו להיכל, ולא ימצאו שמן תורה במקדוש אלא פח אחד, ולא היו בוי להדליק אלא יום אחד בלבד, והדליקו ממנו נרוס המערוכו 8 ימים, עד שקודשו זיסים והוציאו שמן תורה. So the Rambam describes us the nace of Hanukkah, he gives us the background, and the Rambam says that when they came into the Eichel on Chofei Kislev, they did not find Shemen Torah, only one little pach, as we know all the story of Hanukkah. And it wasn't enough Shemen Torah only to be madlik Yom Echad bilvad. The amount of the oil which was contained within this pach was only enough for one day. And there was a nace, and was Dol Konelas Amarocho Shmeina Yomim. Ad, what happened 8 days later, the Rambam tells us very specifically and precisely, Shekotshu zeisim, till they pressed olives, v'hoitziu shemen Torah. I'd like to talk today about these 3 words in the Rambam, ad shekotshu zeisim. Remember, this is Machlekes Rishonim in the Meiri in Shabbos, and the Abudram in Hilchas Megillah says, because the Gemara state in Menachos, in the Sugyas HaGemara in Menachos in Daf Pehei, it says that they brought, everything they brought min hamuvchor. So the Gemara says, where do they bring the Shemen to the Menorat? The Shemen they brought from a city called Tkoya. Zok the Meiri, and Abu Dram says the same thing, that from Yerushalayim to Tkoya, there was a Mahalach Dalad Yomi. They went 4 days. It didn't take him a couple of hours to press the zeisim. So the reason why the nest of the Pach Shemen had to last for 8 days, because in the very same day they walked in on Chofei Kislev, they sent a delegation of people who are going to prepare the new Shemen Torah for the Beis HaMikdash. And being that it takes 4 days journey on the way there and back, apparently it takes 3.5 days, a half a day it takes them to press, 4 days back, takes 8 days, that's why the nace has to last for Shmeina Yom. The Ravid and other Rishonim, the Sefer HaEshkel, say the reason why the nace was 7 days, 8, they needed extra 7 days, and the Menorat should light for 8 days, is because the Bekim in Maaseh HaShemen, it wasn't pasha to press the olives, you needed a bekim, and those were Tomei Meis because of the Milchama. Imele, they had to wait 7 days, Shivas Yemei Tumah, for them to become Tahor, for Yom Echad L'Tikun Hashem. Okay. If I look in the Sugya in Shabbos in Daf Chofalov Amud Beis, it says, the Ran, very similar to the Shitas Meiri and Abu Dram. It says, why did it take 8 days? Shemen Torah rochoik 4 yomim, He says Tkoya had a warehouse. It's not that they had to go and press new oil in Tkoya once they got there. There was stored in a warehouse in Tkoya enough Shemen to supply for the Beis HaMikdash. They used to prepare. It took them 4 days to go, pick up the load, put it back on the donkey, on the horse, on the camel, whichever way they carried, going back to Yerushalayim. So it's very similar to the Abu Drama de Meir, what Abu Drama de Meir say that they had to be koitish in the day that they arrived in Tkoya. The Ran says no, they just came to Tkoya, they picked up the load, and the return, the delivery, took 7-8 days altogether. So in the Rambam, if you look in the Rambam, with the Rambam we just read, the Rambam says ad shekotshu zeisim. Apparently the Rambam holds like those shitas that you needed to be koitish the Shemen Torah and not to pick up from a ready Shemen Torah. And the people, the Noisekel of the Rambam are ready, the Meforsha Rambam Oimid. What does the Rambam tell us? The Rambam wasn't a story bichol the Rambam is telling us. The Rambam just says, Ad shehoyolem Shemen Torah. Why is the Rambam emphasizing the fact, Ad shekotshu keilu, these chashivas, to the fact that the replacement or the replenishment of the new oil has to become via ktisha? And maybe we will have today a crystal ball to understand what the Rambam 3 words, Ad shekotshu zeis. So the truth of the matter is, there's a Sugyas Hagmor in Avodah Zarah in Daf Tes Amud Aleph, a famous Gemara. And the Gemara comes along and says as follows. The Gemara counts the years of different monarchies and different malchias which ruled throughout the Tkufa of Bayis Sheni. So the Gemara says like this. Malchus Poras, Bifnei HaBayis, 34 Shon. The beginning was Malchus Poras, 34 years. Malchus Yovon Bifnei HaBayis, 180 Shon. The Malchus of Yovon took 180 years. Malchus Chashmonai'm, which this is the Chashmonai'm we're talking about here in the Neis Chanukah, Bifnei HaBayis, 103 Shon. Malchus Beis Hordus, 103. Says Rashi. Malchus Poras Bifnei HaBayis, Bizman HaBayis Be'oido Bonu L'achar Shebnoi Koresh, Nimshecho Malchus 34 Shonim, Ubotlo, V'tofsu Bnei Yovon U'Malchu 180 Arei Mosayim Ve'arboesre. Ram says, if they 34, and then they added and they took 180, I add 34 to 180 is 214. Ubnei Chashmonai'm notlu Malchus Miyevon U'Molchu Kuf Gimel, V'hodus Achareim Kuf Gimel, so it's 103, 103, 206 plus 214. Harei Daled Meis V'chof Shona Shei Bayis Sheni Be'yishuvei. It took altogether 420 years from the Bayis Sheni. Balkaponim state in the Rambam, in the Gemara, in the Sugyas HaGemara, that the Malchus Chashmonai'm began after 214 years, which was comprised of 34 years of Poras and 180 years of Yovan. If you look in the Sugya of Erechin, Daf Yud Beis, Amud Beis, is a machlekes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanon, when you count Shmita in the Yovelis. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Shnas HaYovel Oilo Lekan Velekan. And Yovel is only 49 years. The 49th year, and the Shnas HaYovel is Oilo Lekan Velekan, which means that when you start counting in the 50th year, it's already the first year of the following Shmita. Rabbanon say, Ein HaYovel Oilo Lekan Velekan, and you start counting in the 51st year. 7 Shmitas is 49 years. The 50th year is Yovel. And thereafter, the 51st year is the first year of the new cycle of Shemitah. Halacha is like Rabbanon. That's how we paskin. Comes on, according to Rabbanon, Malchus HaChashmonai'm, that started after 214 years. Okay, that's what we said. 180 years of Yovan, and prior to that 34-year Poras. It started in the Shona Hashminis, which is the first one to the Shona Hashminis from the next Yovel. Why? Because 200 years is 4 Yovelis, 14 years is 2 Shmitas, and now the last year of Malchus Yovan was Shmita. So it comes out the whole story of Neis Chanukah was Shmita. And the Shona Rishona LeMalchus HaChashmonai'm, of when the Nes Chanukah happened. That was in the first year of that when they took over. That's counted that year. That was Shana Shminis for the previous Shmita, or Shana Rishono for the new Shmita. The Gemara in Gittin, there's a machlekes Rebbe and Rabbanon, if by Sheni there were Shmitas and Yovelis midaraisa. Do we have Bechlal Shmitas and Yovel or not? Do we say you need Roiv Yeshveo Leo, and Roiv means Roiv of Kol Shevet and Shevet? And Rabbanon hold that by Sheni we did have Yovel. Shmita was Noyeg, even though Yovel was not Noyeg. Rabbeinu Tam, there in the Sugi Nashaleach in Gittin, says that in Bai Sheni Midaraisa Yovel was Noyeg. Why? Because you don't need a Roiv of Kol Shevet and Shevet, and it's enough Miyut of Kol Shevet and Shevet. So it comes out, even according to Rebbe, there was Shmita Midaraisa in the Tkufa of Bai Sheni. We read the Rambam, and the Rambam said that the Nes of Chanukah was from a new oil. And the Rambam says, Kochu Shemen Chodosh. In other words, the Pach was from the old oil, but the Kochu Shemen Chodosh, they had to replenish, and they were Kotesh the Shemen. Problem is, Sugyas HaGemara in Rosh Hashanah in Daf Yud Beis, state in the Gemara is talking about in the chiyuv of meiser. So we know you cannot meiser until the pri came to a certain level of maturity. So it says like this: Atvu ve'azeisim misheyoviu shlish. Zocht Rashi, azeisim yitzor shemen misheyovi shlish misaser achashona sheigia bo lishlish b'shulam im shnio im shlishis. Whenever the zayis grew a third, okay, the shaila is how do you count this third? But whenever the zayis grew a third, that's the shnas you count that year. If by the end of the year the zayis happen to grow a third, erev Rosh Hashanah, so at that time already you count that it's the previous years. If it only grew shlish after Rosh Hashanah, the payers are counted. In other words, the counting of the payers, if it's payers shviz, payers shminis, payers shnishni, or payers shlishis, is totally if the payers were maybe shlish in the shana we want to be miyachas the zeisim. So the Gemara Milan Emil Omer Avasi Omer Rabbi Yechon Umato B'Shmei Rabbi Yosef Baglili or Makro Miketz Sheva Shoni B'Moed Shnas Hashmita B'Chag HaSukkos. Shnas Hashmita Ma'avidet B'Chag HaSukkos. It says like the mitzvah of Kohol Shnas Hashmita Shnas Chag HaSukkos. Shminisi Elaloi Ma'aloch Miketz. It says Miketz Sheva Shoni. In other words, when you finish 7 years, the Chag HaSukkos you come everybody mitzvahs hakel. Where's Vukum Chag HaSukkos in Miketz Sheva Shoni? Chag HaSukkos already belongs to the Shana Hashminis. Hello, so the more lemal called Tvua Shevia Shlish Beshvis Lifnei Rosh Hashanah Atanoyek Bo Minag Shvis Beshminis. Paris that was heavy Shlish prior to Rosh Hashanah, so they have a din of Paris Shvis in the Shana Hashminis, and that's why it says Miketz Sheva Shoni B'Moyed Shnas Hashmita B'Chag HaSukkos. So Memele comes out that the Zeisim that they pressed that year in Chanukah, there were Zeisim that were maybe Shlish, apparently in Shviz, and the Gemara Gidl, which takes several, a few months to the Gemara Gidl till the Roy to be pressed, were in Shnas Ashminis. The question is as follows. There's a big shmuas in Shemen Shel Shviz, if you could use this for Ner Chanukah. The halacha is that Shemen Shel Shviz, you're allowed to use, it says, Lochem L'chol Tzorcheichem, and the Gemara learns out in Kama Mekoimis in Shas that Lahadlokas Haner is called Kol Tzorcheichem. You're not allowed to waste. Perish Shviz is La'ochlo. You have to do it for usage. It says La'ochlo v'lo l'schoyer v'lo l'ibud v'lo, whatever it is, you have to eat it. You're allowed to be nehana from it. So the halacha is, it says, V'hoiso Lochem Shabbos Haaretz. You learn out from the pasuk Lochem L'kol Tzorcheichem. Shaila came in Eretz Yisrael. Are you allowed to use Shemen of Shviz for Adlokas Ner Chanukah? It's the halacha is not allowed to be mishtamish l'oyer. You can't be mishtamish in the oyer of Ner Chanukah. You can't light candles and sit down and read in front of the candles. So because since you're burning it, normally you're allowed to like look us on there because you're using it, you're lighting up the room and you're reading, you're doing all your tashmish. Being not allowed to be in the henef from the Chanukah from the oyer, so melu bleib leochlo v'loy lehefset. I say the Chazon Ish had gepasken that you cannot use Shemen Shviz from their Chanukah of leochlo v'loy lehefset. Others didn't agree with this psak of the Chazon Ish, and the reason was, amongst them, was Rabbi Yashiv. The reason why, because since you're allowed to be, it says if you are moisif and ner to the shamesh, so maybe you could be ner from all the neirs agav you being the henna. That ner is not counted as part of the Chanukah. So Rabbi Yashiv tained that the yois everybody puts shamesh next to the Chanukah candles. So you're allowed to be in the henna already. For the ner Chanukah, maybe it's called the kol tzorchechem. So in Chanukah we had a shaila. Do we or don't we allowed to use, are we or aren't we allowed to use Shemen Shel Shviz Lahadlokas Neiris Chanukah? What's with the Menorat? In the Ran, in Shabbos, if you look at the Ran says the Ner Chanukah, but I'm not looking the Sugya from Chanukah. Ner Chanukah also da Sa'uo Kemenorat. Says the Balamor, Kivin Shem Zeichel and Neiris for the Shemen Shel Eichel, Asurim Ba'ano Kol Iker. Says the Ner Chanukah, you're not allowed to be in the henna because it blibes like the Menorat. In the Menorat, you're not allowed to be in the henna kol iker. Shemen is also ba'ano. If somebody's mishtamish la'oyer, in the oyer of Beis HaMikdash, he's over to Yisur Me'ilah. You're not allowed to be moyel, you're not allowed to be in the henna from the oyer of the Menorat because being in the henna, shteit mefurish, is a Me'ilah. So the question is, so, you're not allowed to be, of course, you're not allowed to be mishtamish, a Shemen of Shviz for Adlokas HaMenorat. Because being that you're not allowed to be in the henna, in Chanukah you have a teretz, you have a way of agavurcha, agav the shamish. But in Shemen HaMenorat is certainly not allowed to be in the henna because nehano from the Shemen HaMenorat, the halacha is yumoyel. Shailitz milo deraisa, milo derabanon, kolomar vereach, it's mare. But akopon is the iser deraisa of being the henna from the oyer HaMenorat. So you're not allowed to use Shemen Shel Shviz. So the question is, how did they use, after the Nes of Chanukah, which they had old Shemen, they kotchu zeisim, and they're going right now, the Chashmonai'm are ruling Beis HaMikdash. So they taking Shemen, they went to Tkoya, either they found in Beis Abad or they pressed. They are this Shemen Chodosh, which they were kotchu b'shminis. It's from zeisim that was heavy shlish, we're talking about Kislev, in have the shviz. If they have the shviz, you can't use them for the Menorat. That's the shayla. One may want to say that, Vibaldi is a mitzvah of Adlokas Neris Menorat, then that's called Kol Tzorchechem, because if you became the mitzvah of Adloka, that's called Kol Tzorchechem. But the Gemara says, the shayla is, if the Gemara is Muchach Mekama Vekama Mekoimis, that you're not allowed to take, the Gemara says, the Moshel Bey, not allowed to take Oimer from Sfiche Shviz, because there's Allah of La'achal V'lo Yisreif, although you need it, or the Gemara is talking about Be'ema Shviz. If you took a Be'ema, it's more in Pcheres and Dafyud Beis. If you took a Be'ema for Moe Shviz, it's Potom in Abcheir, the Gemara says, and it's Chayav Matanis. Why is it Potom in Abcheir? Because La'achal V'lo Yisreif. Because since the Imur Manisraf, so it's La'achal V'lo Yisreif. So you see that even though there is a usage of Avos HaOimer, of Akrovas Imurim, it's called L'Sreif, it's not called L'Kol Tzorchechem. So Mela comes back the question, L'Chure, the Shemen of Shviz, which was the Shemen that were Kritish, in the Shona Reish Tesvav, which is the Shona Rishona, Shona Shminis, but they used the payers that they took, the Avor, maybe Shlish in Shona Shviz, L'Chure, there is a major shaila of not allowed to use them for Adlokas HaMenorat. What happens in Zeisim? We know that the Zais brings fruit a couple times a year. We're talking about the agriculture people that grow. Some places have 2 crops, some people have 3 crops, but they could be on the same Elon Zeisim from last year, from this year. But according to the Rishonim, there's machlokes, what's Avoah Shlish? Shlish means shlish from the size of the Zais, or shlish means a third of the amount of oil that potentially could come out of the zayis once it's fully ripe. What happened? They seem that the Chanukah and the Avo Shlish, that there was a Chanukah in Shminis, and they didn't still bring a Shlish. The Gemara says, the Gemara is a Shaila in Menachos. The Gemara is a Shaila. More Menachos Daf Peivov is a Shaila. They seem Shelo Yaviu Shlish. If it's kosher l'adlaka, it's called a Shemen, or it's called a Moihal. Moihal means it's just a secretion, it's just a liquid. It's not really oil. More as a Shaila. The Rambam Paskin, I read the Rambam in Luchos Yisroel Mizbech, and kosher l'menera l'rishoin v'revi v'shvi bilvad. The only oils which are kosher for adlokas hamanera is the first oil, you keep on pressing, the fourth oil, and the seventh oil. Shenemar kosis lamor, ein kosher l'menera ela yoyse min hakotush bilvad. Only something which is being pressed. Aval l'menachas kuluk shem. If it secretes, if the zayis oozes any oil, the menorah, you have to press it. Okay? So, besides the fact that I need Shemen Zayis in the Hefzer, it has to be oil, not canola oil, but it has to be olive oil. There's additional halacha, even if you let the oil, the olive secrete oil, and I take that oil and I want to be mishtamish to the menorah, it's not good. It's possible. Why? Because it says kosis, and kosis means it has to be kotush. Milk comes out. What happens by Shemen from Zeisim Shelo Yaviu Shlish Legabe Trumas Amaisis? The halacha is a part of Trumas Amaisis. This is beferish halacha Mishnah in Trumas. The Rambam Paskins that Shemen of Shemen shehoitzi mizeisim sheyotza mizeisim Shelo Yaviu Shlish potum in Trumas Amaisis. Why? Says the Rash of Menorat, because it's not called a pri. The shem pri is chal when it's avar shlish. So, lichura, how are you yoytze this Shemen Shelo Yaviu Shlish? The Rambam says, the Rambam Paskins, that you could use Shemen Shelo Yaviu Shlish. I'm reading the Rambam in Luchos Yisroel Mizbeach. Rambam in Perek Vov says, Eila Chashmonai'm apsulim, the Rambam is talking about adloka menorah. Shemen Shel gargerim shenoshu b'mayim, some pits that were soaked in water, or zeisim kvushim, or shlukim, or Shemen Shel shmorim, or Shemen Shel reicho rak, or leila psulim. Aval, Shemen Zay Shenoto Bebeis HaZvolim, you plant it in the garbage, or Bebeis HaShlochim. Oy Shenizra Zera Beineim, Oy Shemen, this is the last category. Shehoitziu Mizeisim Sheloi Bishlu, Ela Nadayin Pagim, Kolelo Yovi. Ve'im Hevi Kosher. The Rambam says that Shemen from Pagim, Koyim Avar Shlish. So, in the Gemara state, it's Kosher L'Adloka. This is the sugya. Even though that theoretically doesn't have a shem pri, because the shem pri, the chaloi shem pri, is always measured. It's not called a pri. You could take that oil, drink it, and not meiser it. Yet, legabe adloko shemen shehoitziu mizachatchila yove badim hevi kosher. So the Chronology there in Menachos in the sugya asks the kasha from another Rambam. The Rambam in Tumas Haichlim. The halacha is, you know, we have Shivan Mashkim, Yad Shochat Dam. Yad Shochat Dam, one of them, the sheen of Shochat, is Yain, Dvash, Shemen, Cholov, Tal, Dam, Mayim. Those are the Shevan Mashkim. Shevan Mashkim, those are the Mashkim or Machshir. If you have to have other payers to be, in order to make Mekabel Tumah, the first have to be Muchshir in one of the Mashkim. So the Rambam says in Perek Aleph in Tumas Haichlim, the Rambam says in my quoting, Zeisiv v'anovim shelo yaviu shlish, Mashkin ayoytzimim eino machshirim v'lo mekablim tumo elarem kishar me'pershim tehirim loylo. The Ram says if you take out either olive oils or wine, grape juice, out of zeisim v'alom shelo yaviu shlish, right? So the mashkim ayoytzim, they're not mekabel tumah because they're not called a pri, and they're not machshir. They can be considered as a mashke to be used for achshoras, another pri to mekabel tumah. Like the Chronology, the Chutz is still in the Rambam. The Rambam says that by Koydem Chanukah Pagim Lo Yoviv Im Hevi Kosher. Why Legabe Adlokas Hamanera Im Hevi Kosher? B'di'evid Lo Yovi, but Im Hevi Kosher, and yet LeInyan Kabbalas Tume or Machshir LeKabel Tume calls man the Shemen, the Zayis is Lo Yovi Shlish. It's not Mekabel Tume and it's not Machshir LeKabel Tume. It's a word Skorov says the Shiur of Pagim is greater than the Shiur of Shlish, but the Sugyas like more Menorat himself says not like that. Theoretically, Pagim and Shlish are the very same Shiur of ripeness, and therefore we have to understand what's the difference. Why by the Menorat the Rambam says that it's kosher b'di'evet al koponim, and legabe kabolas tume, and legabe machshel lekabel tume, the halacha is it's not kosher. If you look in the Rambam, you'll see a chiluk. If you look very, very careful in the Rambam, you see a major chiluk in the Lashon Rambam between the Hilchas Yisur Mizbeach and Hilchas Tumas Eichlim. Let me read you the Rambam. In Hilchas Yisur Mizbeach, the Rambam says, Shemen shehoitziu mizeisim sheloi bishlu elem adayim pagim lo yoviv im hevi kosher. In other words, the Rambam is not talking about that the zayis oozed, but hoitziu. In other words, the Rambam says that you took zayis shelo hevi shlish. It's still young. It's kodem avar shlish, and you took it into the press, and you squeezed it out. You took shemen. So the Rambam says this shemen lechatchil lo yovi. But once you koitish the zeisim al koponim, since it's a zayis, maybe missing in the chalosh and pri legabe trumas umaisos, legabe tuma, legabe anything else. But being that it is lemaisa zayis, it is zayis. We know the halacha is somebody's muder ano from zayis is not allowed to eat the zeisim even koyim avar shlish, because the hefza of the pri zayis. You need a certain level of ripeness for tumas umaisos, for tumas oichlin, from hechshel lekabel tuma, but it's a zayis. So the Rambam says shemen shehoitziu. You took the zeisim koyim avar shlish and you squeezed them out. It's kosher leadlok. Masha'enkin in tumas oichlin, I read the Rambam in Hilchos tumas oichlin. In Zog the Rambam zeisim ve'anovim shelo yaviu shlish. The Rambam brings down the halacha zeisim ve'anovim shelo yaviu shlish. Mashkin hayoitzin mehen eina machshir. The Rambam is not talking about a case where you took the zeisim and the anovim and you pressed it, you made a k'tisha, you took it into the base habad and you made a k'tisha, whichever form or shape of k'tisha was done those days. The Rambam says mashkin hayoitzin mehem. It's called mashkin hazovim. The mashkin, the pri, the zay shalohevi shlish oozed, and some secretion of oil came out of the zayis. Now we say, since it's lohevi shlish, this mashkim is considered lemoyel ba'amo, and it doesn't have a Torah shemen in order. It's not machshir to mekabel tumah. I said this for myself, and I saw Sefer Emunas Yosef. We know on Yerushalmi and Maisros, he goes very much with the Zalba Mahalach. There is a chiluk between kochu and zovu, and he'll come out with a big chiddush. He's declaring a big chiddush that if somebody takes zeisim shelo yaviu shlish, and he's koitish them in beis habad, so he wants to say that b'chai gavne would be considered shemen al koponim, and it would be mekabel tumah, and it's a big chiddush because we know kodim avar shlish is not called a mashke, and it's not mashke not to be mekabel tumah. But if the Lashon Rambam is moire very clearly and precisely, and when the Rambam is talking about the neiris of the Menorat, the Rambam is talking about shehoitziu mehem shemen. You pressed it physically and you moitzi mehem shemen. In other words, it's not that if you take a fruit, the way I understand it, the zeisim, the shemen is inside. But kolzman shelo yaviu shlish la'achar avar shlish, even if it oozed, doesn't make a difference because the pri is a ripe fruit, and then any secretion comes out of it as a shemen, as a shemen. But koydem avar shlish, being that the fruit is still boiser, it's still pagin, it's still koydem avar shlish. So if it secretes itself, you let it ooze, you put it in the heat and you let it ooze and some oil came out, that oil is taken not kosher. But if you squeezed it out and you made a k'tisha and it's called shemen kosis, then chatchilo yovi, but b'di'evet you may be kosher. Mele, the difference is not a difference between tumas oichlin. The stira he's asking, l'chura, it's one halacha. It should be a consensus amongst all the Shulchan Aruch, all the halachas, from Kabbalas Tumah, from Hechshel Kabbalah Tumah, from Trumas Umaisos, from Kashas for the Menorat. It's not that the halacha differs here and there. The chiluk is in the Menorat, since there is a din, and why did the Rambam bring it that way? Because since in the Menorat there is a halacha, even by a viu shlish, you have to be koitish, because there's a din of kosis. Even la'achar avar shlish, if it oozed by itself is no good because it's din of kosis. So by the menorah, every time you have to take the zaysim to Beis Abad and squeeze them out. Therefore, the Rambam is talking about what did you do? You want to become the din kosis. You took zaysim shelo aviu shlish. You pressed them and you itziu mehem shemen. So the Rambam chatchil yoviv may be kosher. Mashe'en kein. I mean, normally you don't go ahead and take a pri shelo aviu shlish and you bring it to Beis Abad to be kodesh. You let the fruit. The normal course of growing agriculture, you grow zaysim, you want the zayis to be ripe in order to maximize efficiency and to have the shemen coming out at the time when the zayis is ripe. Therefore, the Ram is talking about the derech ha'olam. Besides by menorah, there's no other place so they take it to be kodesh. Especially, most certainly, prior to his havsholah of the pri kodim avar shlish. So what happened if you did cut off some of them and you let them stand for a couple days, and they were standing in a warm place, and it oozed, and it took out some secretion? You take that shemen from zaysim shelo aviu shlishi yotza me'atzmoi. It's called moihal. It's not called a mashke. It's a din of a mashke peiris. It's not one of the zayin mashkim, and it's not mekabel tumer, and it's not also not machshir lekabel tumer. So it's a big chiddush, and I'm saying it will come out take a chiddush. And if somebody goes ahead and takes from that shemen of the menorah, you went to prepare shemen for the menorah. Just giving you an example. Somebody went and took a shemen which was meant to be for the menorah, and he was kodesh, and now he had some shemen on the side. That shemen went, and by mistake, or he took it lechatchila, he poured it on top of other peiros. So those other peiros, b'chai gavne, that they were muchsher from that shemen that was squeezed prior to avar shlish, being that they used the shemen which was kodesh, because for the menorah we need shemen kosis, that shemen will be machshel lekabel tumah. I mean, it's a great chiddush. I'm saying the Emunas Yosef says it, that it's a big chiddush, but that's what he wants to take on. So Meila, there is no steer in the Rambam. If it's hoitziu, if it's duchtisha, then it's, even though kodim avar shlish lechatchilo yavi bayim hevi kosher. If it's zav me'elov, if it's something which is by itself secreted and oozed out of the fruit, achar avar shlish has a shem pri, and there's a din of tumas mashkin, there's a din of maestris, there's a din of machshel kabel tumah. Kodim avar shlish, if it oozed by itself, it doesn't have a shem mashke, as a shem of moel be'almo, and since it has a shem of moel be'almo, the halacha is that it is not mekabel tumah, and it's not machshir other peiros for being mekabel tumah. Let's go back to the Rambam. The Rambam says what happened. Says the Rambam that idliku, they came in b'chofei l'chodesh kislev. If you remember the lashon Rambam in the beginning, the Rambam says that nichnasu leichel v'lo imotzu shemen torah b'mikdosh elo pach echod bilvad v'lo hoyo boi lahadlik elo yom echod v'idliku memeno neir samaroch shmeina yomim. And the reason why the neis always says to be the tzorech, the reason why it needed the neis to be shmeina yomim, the Rambam says the words ad shekotshu zaysim. The Rambam says till they pressed, till they were kodesh zaysim. What does it mean, kotshu zaysim? The Rambam means the ktishas hazaysim. The Rambam over here is not telling us that he's telling us what do they do. You know, they went to here, they went to there. The Rambam says ache kotshu zaysim. The reason why is you need the ktishas zaysim in particularly in the shono of the Neis of Chashmonai'm. As we said, the Chashmonai'm started ruling in the year Reish Tesvav Leminyan Hashmita. In the Reish Tesvav, it was exactly after 4 Yovlis and 2 Shmitas. And this is Shona Hashminish, which is Shona Rishona for the next cycle, but it's Shona Shminish to the previous cycle. So every year, normally the Lekita of Zaysim is, the Rambam says, if you look at the Rambam says what's normally when there are Leiket the Zaysim, the Leiket the Zaysim usually Koydem Atzeres. As I state in the Rambam in the beginning, in Perek Zayin, Shmita B'Yovel, Zman Lekitas HaZaysim, normally each Pri has a time when they Leiket. You could go ahead and take it off the tree in different times of the year, but the Rambam is talking about the Zmanim of the payers. When do they usually cut the Zaysim off the tree? So the Rambam says in Shmita B'Yovel, Perek Zayin Alocha Aleph, Zman Halekite Hu Koydem Atzeres. So Mele comes out that the Zeisim that was Nigmar called Sorotzkin in Chodesh Teves in that year, Reish Tesvav of Binya Beis Hamikdash, there were maybe Shlish in the previous year of which was Shnas Shmita. And being that those payers, those Zeisim are Peiros Shvis, so they have Kedusha Shvis. If they have Kedusha Shvis, L'chure, as we showed, that you're not allowed to use, not allowed to be nehene from the Shemen, not allowed to be nehene from the Oira Menorat because it bleibt Me'ila. So there's no trick, there's no add-ons of the Shamish, there's no Shamish, you're not allowed to be nehene, Kol nehene is, the Gemara says the Umman used to fix the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishal Shalom in Kupus in order for them not to see, just looking at the Hoid Ve'hodor Beis Hamikdash was a Shiloh of Me'ila. Shiloh Me'ila, the Reisa, the Rabbanon, Bakupanim, the Shiloh of Me'ila. So certainly you're not allowed to read L'Oira Menorat, you're not allowed to read L'Oira Menorat because it is a Shiloh of Me'ila. So the question is, those Zeisim, which was Nigmar called Sorotzkin, the fully ripe Zeisim, in that they took. So if this fully ripe Zeisim were maybe Shlish in Shana Shviz, and if Shviz, if they'll press them and bring that oil, the oil would not be royal ad loka. The reason why the oil not royal ad loka is because in Peiros Shviz is halacha of la'ochlo v'loy l'sreifa. Not the same thing la'ochlo v'loy la'avodain, la'ochlo v'loy. You're not allowed to eradicate it, you're not allowed to throw it out. You know that you eat Peiros Shviz in Eretz Yisrael. You have to be careful, even in something which is not royal Michoel Odom. If it's royal Michoel Kelev, you take the peels of the oranges, you got to store them in the Pach Shmita. There's a whole, till they become nifsad me'achilas kelev, and then you can throw them out. There's a Kedusha Shviz on the entire pre. So you're not allowed to be, today, there's halacha of l'ochlo v'loy l'seifa. So what do? They had a problem. What do? They went to the Chashmonai'm, they asked the kasha, what do we do this year? If we go ahead and take the fully ripe Zeisim that we have, take it off the trees, then it's going to take us, it's going to be Peiros Shviz. It'll be Peiros Shviz, we won't be able to use for the Menorat. Behechruch, they took peiros which are freshly grown. Avoah Shlish was in, the Chanukah was in Shnas Hashminis. And they were like them by Tevis. In other words, from the second crop, that the Chanukah, the Avoah Shlish, was after the Rosh Hashanah of the first year that they took over in Shnas Reish Yisrael, which is the Shana Rishayna, Shana Shminis, to the previous Shmita, Shana Rishayna for this Shmita. And comes out that the Shemen, since it's Kodim She'evi Shlish, it's the Avoah Shlish peiros that grew in Shana Shminis, you cannot have a peiros that She'evi Shlish in Chodesh Teves, in Chodesh Kislev, Chodesh Teves, the beginning of Teves, they had 7 days. In 2 months, you can't have a fully Avoah Shlish. So they took the peiros, which is Kodim Avoah Shlish, and they used them for the Menorat. The problem is, as they say, so Mashkin HaYotzim is not Machshir. If they weren't Kodesh, if the Zeisim was Zav Me'aleim, it's Moel Ba'alma, it's no Din Mashke. So Mimele theoretically shouldn't be used for Shemen HaMenorat. Says the Rambam name. You know what they did? Ad Shekotshu Zeisim. I tell you, that the Rambam is not telling us a Maisele Ad Shekotshu Zeisim. The Rambam says, the Rambam tells us specifically and precisely in the time of the Chashmonai'm, there was a need to be kodesh, the Zeisim, in order to use them. Because for this peiros, you could be machshir, the Shemen, even though that Shemen was not Mevi Shlish, is talking about Zeisim, Kodim Avoah Shlish. Because at that period of time in the Shana Hashminis, the peiros did not have enough time to become ripe enough to be Mevi Shlish, and therefore it's Peiros Shlevi Shlish. L'chatchila Yavi, what can I do? We cannot have l'chatchila Yavi. Again, if they went and they had a storage and they're from the Alta Yom, Fishon, Chamishi, Shishis, old Shemen Zais, after expiration date, so the whole Shaila is not a Shaila. But the Ram doesn't say that. The Ram doesn't say they went there. The Ram says Achakotru Zeisim. The Ram says they went and they were Kodesh. The reason why the Rambam is telling Achakotru Zeisim, because the Rambam is teaching us that at this particular year, the only way they could use it is only if they were Kodesh, the Zeisim Beyadayim, if they took that Zeisim and they crushed it in their own hand, in which case, L'chatchil Yavi, but Shemen Shalohevi Shlishi, which you were Kodesh, you mekayim the din kosis, and you could be miyoytze the mitzvah of adlokas haner, adlokas hameneire from that shemen.